Rapid response and newsjacking are popular ways to secure coverage for tech brands and to build relationships with new reporters, but it's very competitive. So what are the best practices for newsjacking in 2026? That's the topic that we're going to talk about today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to FiredUp, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Morgan McLintic, and today we're going to be talking about rapid response. And to do that, I am joined by our head of media relations, Chris Ulbrich. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, good to be here.
It's good to have you. So let's talk about rapid response. Just to set the scene then, Chris, can you just explain what rapid response actually is?
Yeah, it's a good question because it is a term which encompasses a number of disciplines which used to be distinct. When I was starting out in PR, rapid response was most closely associated with crisis communication. So it was the discipline of getting ahead of a story or countering, like in a political context, countering political attacks on your candidate. So it wasn't the sort of thing that product people, did very, very often. But the terminology sort of migrated over to product PR, and it came to be used in any context where the PR team was trying to convert a time-sensitive opportunity. Now, even within that, there are two major categories that are commonly referred to or as rapid response today. One, which is also sometimes known as newsjacking, is trying to insert your clients or your company's commentary into coverage of events of the day. So a reporter is writing on deadline. You have reason to think the reporter is writing a story you often don't know. In fact, most of the time you probably don't know. And you are contacting the reporter with a perspective from your spokesperson that you think would be useful in the story and ideally would inflect the story in the direction of your messaging, maybe even, depending on the story, your product.
And I might think about this as a given example, like cybersecurity. This is pretty common in cybersecurity. There's a threat. You probably know who's going to write about it because there's a handful of people that do. Everyone just has those reporters on speed dial, as people would like to say, right? They know exactly who they're going to go to, and you've got to get in there quickly. That's an example of that.
That's exactly it. And in fact, I would say that security is probably the sub-discipline of PR where that form of rapid response or newsjacking, I don't even know it qualifies as newsjacking, and because those kinds of stories in the security press, security experts are core sources for those stories. Yeah. Now, typically, in a security campaign, one of your goals is to be a trusted source for a reporter so that they're reaching out to you. But initially, in a campaign like that, you'll be reaching out cold to provide insight, which is hopefully of use in establishing yourself as a helpful source for this or for future opportunities. Now, I can never get too far into this subject, as people who have heard us discuss this sort of thing on the podcast before, without sort of addressing the term newsjacking, which I really don't like. It's not the discipline itself or the practice itself that I think is problematic. It's just the sort of hostile, oppositional tone of it. Right. And I know it's just a name for the thing, right? But I think it's a bad starting point for what you're trying to accomplish because it has that implication of hijacking an unwilling party, that you're almost gleefully, you're reveling in the idea that you're taking over, you're parasitizing the reporter's story. And I just think that's the whole wrong mindset to have. You're not going to be successful thinking that way. And so I prefer to just rapid response, call it rapid response. It's fine. When you are doing this, your first thought needs to be, what do I have that could possibly be of interest to the reporter? And, we'll get into more detail further on, but just to say at the beginning, this is a big challenge because most companies don't have anything to offer the reporter, but they will still put pressure on their PR people, whether they're in-house or agency, to reach out with what is effectively a substandard product. So part of what we're going to be talking about is what a good product looks like.
Yeah, that's the first of these kinds of rapid response. News is breaking. And it's relevant in some way to your brand, and you want to get your spokespeople and your take into those articles. So that's one, and we'll talk more about that. What is the other, which is probably what most people think when they say rapid response?
The other side of it is what used to be known as a call for sources. And I will still, in conversation with clients, I'll still refer to it that way. And these are typically generated on platforms that are matchmakers, essentially, between reporters or bloggers working on a story that need comment on a particular topic and PRs representing spokespeople, representing brands typically, who might have comment to offer. So the simplest form of these is a email newsletter like ProfNet or HARO, which collects source requests from reporters over presumably the course of the day, and then sends an email in the morning with the description of the opportunity and the details for response, what kind of spokesperson is needed, what kind of commentary would be welcome, what the deadline is. And so that's the sort of the simplest form, but more robust platforms have emerged, like one that we use called Quoted, which is a more full-featured sort of SaaS platform. The basic idea is more or less the same, but the Quoted platform actually has a mechanism for taking the commentary from the spokesperson. PRs can load up profiles of all the different spokespeople they represent, and then all that information is easy to attach when you put in your comment on behalf of the spokesperson. And there are other useful features, not least of which is that on this particular platform, Quoted, it keeps track of who has already submitted comment for the same opportunity. So you can see what you're up against. You can see if your competitors have submitted. You can see how many other spokespeople have submitted. And if it's 2 hours before deadline and there are 60 people in front of you, and the platform will also show that the reporter has responded to 5 of those people already, you might think, okay, it's not worth getting my spokesperson revved up for this because the chances we're going to get this are relatively slim. So the call for sources is fundamentally distinct from the other form of rapid response where you're reaching out proactively to the reporter, because in the one case, in the call for sources case, that the reporter is writing. They have told you. They've given you all the specs. Now, in the other case, you don't even know for sure that they're writing in most of the time. Ideally, you have a strong enough relationship with the reporter that you can say, hey, I saw the news break on such and such break today. Are you writing anything on this? If so, I could hook you up with comment from Jennifer, your trusted source at my client. That's the dream. Most of the time you don't know, and you're taking a flyer on it. And for that reason, because the sheer number of PRs in the world compared to reporters in the world has gotten so dramatically out of whack. It was out of whack when I started about 20 years ago.
Is it 7-1 or something now?
Yeah. I mean, you could have named almost any number and I would have said, oh, that sounds reasonable. I just heard this reporter at Fortune say that she has about 500 incoming pitches at any given time to sort through. And again, if you've been in this business for a while, the numbers have always been high. But AI, as we've discussed on previous episodes, has turned up a big problem and made it all but unmanageable, because now PRs and brands are just creating pitches with AI. So those are now flooding in to reporters' emails, which is just all to say that your chance of going with a reporter from 0, they've never met you, to they want to put your spokesperson's idea into their story today, it's just a vanishingly small chance. I'm not saying it's impossible, depending on who your spokesperson is. If your spokesperson is a household name, or at least a household name in the households of the reporters you're pitching, then okay, maybe. If you have a piece of data that is just so on point, absolutely, maybe. But if this is a relationship building exercise, the chances of it converting are relatively slim. So in practice, rapid response has migrated bit by bit over to the call for sources as more and more reporters complain about PR, bad PR, timely pitches, rapid response pitches, just so as to not get on the bad side of reporters you don't know. The PRs have been sort of raising the bar with their clients about when they're going to recommend a rapid response, where in the past, it was just something you might expect to do every day. And again, it's hard to generalize because there are areas and there are certainly specialists where that might be your bread and butter. But I would say that as a rule, like sort of looking across the tech industry, tech PR, they're getting less success out of that classic, I'll use the term one more time, newsjacking approach than would have been the case 20 years ago. And that's the last time I'm using it on this episode.
Fair enough. And so most of them are coming through, these rapid response opportunities are coming through, lists of, formerly used to be called HARO, I think it's called Sources for Sources now. And there's ProfNet. They're coming through quoted with this marketplace, as you said. And then, of course, there's LinkedIn and sometimes reports, I've got a new job. I'm looking for pitches on this. And it comes, members of PR people are members of Facebook groups where people are sharing, hey, such and such is looking for sources. And of course, if you work in an agency, hey, I just spoke to this person. They're looking for other guests on this, or they're looking for a commentary about this. And often you'll see articles with like multiple clients from one agency because they've all just piled into this one opportunity.
That's true.
There. So it's not exclusively through these marketplaces, to be fair, but you can really see quite quickly. The reason it's called rapid is that there's a lot of people sitting on the AI keyword in quoted looking for an opportunity for their client. And maybe they've got some commentary ready to go. I don't know exactly what they're pitching, but you can see they have submitted something. And so the conversion rate, let's talk about that, of these opportunities, because they're looking for the best quote, the best commentary, maybe from people that they've spoken to before that are already sources that maybe they've forgotten. But the conversion rate is quite low, certainly for a brand that's just starting out. How do you decide which ones to go for?
Yeah, there are several factors that go into that decision. The classic question is this strategic for us? Which is a fancy way of saying, is this relevant to our goals? So there are any number of opportunities out there to input on questions where reporters are taking commentary from people of all backgrounds. And if you just want to see your name in the paper, you might offer your views on the Oscar red carpet. Now, that's an extreme example of an opportunity that is probably not strategic for most brands. And truth be told, that sort of story used to be sourced with calls for sources or various forms of rapid response. But these days, you actually see those stories being constructed right off social media. It's a lot easier to just pull tweets rather than set up interviews or do an email exchange with someone they find through a call for sources. So that's one end of it. But ideally, you ask yourself as the PR, does this opportunity, if it converts, increase awareness of my client amongst, this is important, amongst the audience they care about getting in front of? And is it an opportunity to get across messages, get across information that is helpful for the client's business goals? Most of the time, our clients are looking to drive leads. So viable, meaningful, rapid response considerations might be, will this opportunity make me look like an authority in the area that I want to be an authority on? Will I get, in the best case scenario, do I get to talk up my own product? Now that's rare, but it's a consideration. And so in various ways, you're asking yourself, if I go to all this trouble and it converts, am I getting anything more out of it than just, hey, Ma, I'm in the paper? And so that's the first cut you make. Is this even worth doing if you knew it was going to ink? But of course, you rarely, if ever, do know that it's going to ink. So you have to ask yourself, is this a topic where we've developed a point of view already? And if we haven't developed a point of view, is it a topic where, we have reason to think that we could quickly come up with something compelling? Is it something we've talked about that we've seen our client talk about at a conference, for instance? Or is it similar to something that they've talked about in the past? Is it directionally the sort of thing we can imagine the spokesperson having an opinion about? Because there's always the practical question with whether you're doing rapid response around timely news, like in the first instance we talked about, or whether you are answering a call for sources. You still need to think about the investment of time and effort, given that most of these opportunities are low percentage plays in the best case. And by low percentage, I would say that like a 50-50 is a pretty good hit rate, right? Meaning if you thought this was 50-50, you'd say that passes the bar. That's about as good as you're going to get. And so typically you're seeing 33%, 15%. I mean, 15's kind of low, but if you judge that the chance is 15%, right? So you're converting, what is it, roughly like 1 in 8 opportunities. That's a lot of effort for the client to put in if you're not going to see a result 7 of those times. If that's the case, you really have to think, is this worth a 1 in 8 shot? Is this like a top tier publication or a reporter, or is the effort itself just getting in front of the reporter and showing that you have something interesting to say, even if they don't end up using it? Is that worth the time? Because that is often the value that you get out of any given response. So you have to consider, starting from the top, you have to consider, is this even on point? Is this even on message? Do we have a point of view on the subject? And is this worth whatever investment of time that we will need to put into it, even if we cross the bar with those first 2 hurdles?
And this is an important decision because I've spoken to prospective clients of ours, companies have come to us who have said, I want to change agencies because we're just chasing our tail after all these opportunities that never convert. And I'm putting them in front of my CEO or my CTO, and it does take time. And so as the sort of agency, you need to be selective about that. And it is a bit of a muscle, I think. Like at the beginning, you've got to get some reps in like, what are our opinions about observability and how that's going to develop? And when you spot a few of these stories, you can say, okay, last time we said this, I'm pretty sure we can write a good out the gate comment that this is the kind of thing that we should be saying here, to build that up a bit and to build some confidence. And internally within the company, it can go through less approvals. It becomes more rapid. But the first few are hard, right? Because, okay, what is this? And then often the spokesperson who might be unfamiliar with it, I submitted this thing a week ago. I haven't seen it come out yet. When is it going to ink? And of course, oftentimes they don't. And so you're stoking up expectation unless it's been presented in the right way. So it is a muscle that you need to build, and you need to pick the ones to go into, particularly at the beginning of a campaign.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a push and pull, right? Because at the beginning of the campaign, just about any reasonably on message, on point opportunity is valuable to go after from the PR team's point of view, because you get some reps in, you build that muscle, you do the work of transforming the ideas and the sort of vague sense you get in an onboarding process of what kind of stories are going to work. You go through the process of hammering that into brand approved quotation, messaging. And that's something you can build on. So in a way, there's an incentive for the PR team early to be putting a lot of opportunities in front of the client, even if they're not maybe as close to the bullseye as you might try to get a little later in the campaign. So that's the incentive for the PR team, because they want to sort of build that muscle and they want to build up that library of approved commentary. But that's where experience comes into play, because you do, even at the beginning, need to exercise some discretion and really ask, is this worth the CEO's time if you're bringing in the CEO, or the VP's time? Especially at the beginning of a campaign, that's often before the value of this kind of exercise has been proven. That's when everybody is most sensitive to taking the executive's time, taking the spokesperson's time. So, ironically, at the moment when it would be actually most useful to have the most access to the spokespeople, people are the most reluctant to provide it, and for understandable reasons. So part of the role of PR, as so often, is negotiating these competing priorities while still pushing the program forward.
And so it's an important part of the program, and it's not a native skill. Often, if this thing has to go through legal, and the legal team are not used to responding rapidly. Rapid and legal are not two things that really coexist. And it can really be slow and the 60th comment at that point. And this is a new workflow. And so it does need to be framed correctly. Okay, so I've seen unquoted, or I've read it on LinkedIn, or I've picked it out of the email. There's this commentary. We've got our quote. Mechanically, what am I doing with it? And then you talked about conversions there. How do I increase the chances of conversion?
Well, a lot of the work that goes into increasing your chance of conversion happens well before the opportunity appears on your screen.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because in practice, if you are at a cold start on a topic, you don't have relevant messaging, you've never worked up a related point of view, it is just going to take you too long to do the research, come up with the form of words, convince your counterpart on the marketing team. Now, I'm talking about an agency context here, but you have to then sell this new perspective in to a counterpart who's never heard it. And there's a decent chance they'll say, oh, I'm not sure. I've never heard us say anything quite like that. And they might be reluctant to take it up to the spokesperson. But then you get past that hurdle, and then you have to convince the spokesperson that this is a good thing for them to say if they've never said it before. And understandably, a lot of spokespeople are going to be reluctant to do that. So there is friction at every point if you're trying to get across comment using words you've never used on a topic you've never commented on before. So the most effective rapid response campaigns are ones that have that sort of library of pre-approved language that you've talked about. And in practice, a lot that often comes from reps over time of doing this. A lot of them failed reps, but the very act of doing an opportunity, of going after an opportunity, will generate material that makes subsequent opportunities faster and more effective. But in the ideal world, you actually build a mini library of commentary at the beginning of the campaign based on the narrative that you'll often construct at the beginning of the campaign. You might anticipate, okay, look, we want to offer comment on these 5 areas. Here are draft comments that we will have in our back pocket. And then as part of the onboarding process, as part of getting your newswire up and running, getting your narrative written, getting your themes agreed with the client, you also will get sign off on this language. And if everything goes perfectly in doing that, you will have properly anticipated the questions that reporters are going to want to answer. And you'll be in a great position to just go out there and be among the first people to respond to an opportunity, because everybody else is starting from zero and you're in pole position.
Right. And so, for example, I'm pretty confident that there will be opportunities around how do you get AI agents into production, and what have been the benefits and some of the challenges that you've seen, and how do we improve that, and where's it going? Everyone wants to get in on this agentic future topic, and it's going to come up in various flavors for different verticals or sizes of business. There's a security lens, there's a hallucination lens, there's lots of different lenses through this, but it's going to come up again and again and again. So there would be a topic you go, okay, here's what we say about this and our
Mhm.
take, and here's some data that we've got, and maybe here's a customer that's where we've done it. They're going to get, because a lot of these opportunities are for IT leaders, and what they really want is not a vendor, but a customer. You've already
That is
spoken to
true.
your customer, you've got them lined up, and they've approved a quote around this that you could use, or you can get them on the phone and, they can jump into this response. So, homework.
That's an important point. I mean, anyone who's been around tech PR will be familiar with the dance around customers. Like,
Oh,
this is for every opportunity, typically the reporter will want the customer point of view because they're writing for practitioners. They're not writing for vendors. Their audience is practitioners who want to learn from other practitioners. Sometimes it is useful for that audience to learn about new products and new opportunities, and that's where your product PR comes in. But most of the time, they're much more interested in hearing from the users of your software than from you yourself. And right before we started this episode, I was just working on an opportunity like that with a new client who doesn't have a customer to offer. And they're responding to a top tier reporter who is looking for commentary about a phenomenon that is right in this client's wheelhouse. But the reporter says, I want to hear from people who are actually doing this, who are actually experiencing this, not enabling the experience to happen, which is what vendors do. So often you find yourself in that position as a vendor. You just don't have a customer willing to talk on the timeline that the reporter needs commentary. And the truth is, that's not the best position to be in. That is a low conversion opportunity. That said, it is still often useful to throw your hat in the ring and say, this is what we are seeing. I can't put a client in front of you, but looking across our clients, this is what we're seeing them do. This is how we're seeing them react. And the important thing, if you take that approach, is you need to pull yourself and your own solution out of the conversation as much as possible. What the reporter cares about is the experience of your customers and how they're grappling with problems, not the fact that they picked your solution over other solutions because you have this particular differentiating advantage. You can still get that message into your response by saying that what we're seeing with our customers is that the problem that they're really up against is bracket problem you solve. And the reason this is so pressing for them is problem statement from your messaging. But, the key here is this doesn't work unless your insight is actually useful, unless your insight is grounded in reality and useful. So the less it sounds like a product pitch, the more likely you are to succeed. Customers are going to convert much more often than vendors. But if you have to do the vendor pitch, offering perspective on your customers is the next best thing.
Now, I imagine because it's rapid, it would be convenient to use AI to answer this question, because I can feed it in. This is generally what I want to say, but save myself some time, particularly because we'll say, hey, here's what they're looking for. And some of these ops are like, they've got 5 questions. It's quite a meaty deliverable that they're looking for. And we know what we want to say. I get AI to say it. Looks good, turn it around real quick, speed, I've hit that. This is not the place to use AI. Right.
Yeah, I agree with that as a practice, as a best practice. And the reason for it is not, it's a matter of principle, I agree with it, but it's also good tactics to de-AIify your rapid response, all of your commentary. And the reason for that is that reporters, like probably all of us, are getting increasingly sensitive to the style of AI writing. AI writing has particular recognizable features, and those features are increasingly detectable to your average person as people get more experience with AI writing. So AI writing that sounded dazzling couple years ago, just because it's incredible that you could simply ask a machine a question and it comes out with a coherent answer. That's black magic, right? But now we've seen it enough, we've become accustomed to it, And it's almost contemptible when it's really obvious. And to the point where you're seeing more and more reporters say that I will reject any comment that sounds like AI out of hand. And some reporters will go so far as to say, I'll never use your comment again. Like, I'll blacklist you. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that a lot of spokespeople are not out there using AI successfully to get in publications. I'm sure. It's a little sideline of mine to run suspicious quotes through AI detectors and sort of see if my suspicions are validated by detectors. And I know that they're not 100% accurate and whatnot, but I have multiple detectors and, it's more of a curiosity thing for me. And I am seeing what I believe to be AI generated commentary out there quite a bit. To me, it's not worth the risk. The ROI is not there, especially, and you have to understand that also that from an agency point of view, your relationships with reporters are all but everything. And so for an agency, the stakes are extremely high because you're going to need to work with this reporter client in, client out for years. And the chance of getting blacklisted over something as trivial as a rapid response comment is simply not worth it. So it is a penny wise, pound foolish kind of optimization in my view. At the same time, I have to be aware that this is a fast changing world. It's a fast changing landscape. Come back to me in a year, I might have a different point of view.
Many reporters, though, many publications have moratoriums on using AI in commentary, right? And so if we are providing it, however intended, and it goes to the reporter and then it gets published, this is going to look bad for them. And that article has to get retracted. And then we get blacklisted as an agency, and certainly the brand gets blacklisted. And it's just not, the whole thing is not great for anyone. So at the moment, there's a lot of sensitivity about, they haven't asked for a commentary from AI. They've asked for a commentary from a source who knows about it. And so even if you write it yourself and it says, it sounds like AI, you have to rewrite it. So there is a little bit of a wrinkle in here that maybe wasn't here a couple of years ago.
That's another part of the conversation we were having, that it's to the point. I mean, AI sounds like AI because it was trained on real business writing.
Right.
So the tics that we associate with AI are actually characteristic of business writing. They're just amplified to an extent that seems unnatural. And so you do find people writing just the way they write, and it's fully human generated, but to all appearances, it's AI. And they might get, you call them and say, this has a bit of an AI flavor. But the thing is that even if it sounds like AI and it isn't AI, I would change it, because we're at the point now where suspicion is, given all the other factors that you're up against when you're doing rapid response, you don't need to add the complication of potentially getting your contribution thrown out because you say that something is not like this, it's like that, that classic AI formulation. It's just, there are other ways to frame it that sound more idiosyncratically human. Just do that. And in fact, we're finding that a fair bit of our work is de-AIifying commentary that, our clients work on with us, and that doesn't reflect badly on them. It's actually an increasingly difficult problem to generate anything original at all, because so much of the basic material that you're working from, core messaging, web copy, it's generated by AI. And so that it's like microplastics. It just sort of leaches into the entire ecosystem. And with the best will in the world, it's hard to create, a paragraph that doesn't have some AI influence in it somewhere.
Yeah. PR people are now paying for all those sort of plasticky quotes in press releases where people were delighted to announce a partnership with them. We've trained the models so that this is what a quote looks like. And now it's come back to bite us because all these people are delighted to comment on this. So rapid response and newsjacking are core to many PR programs. It is a bit of a muscle that you need to build, but it can be a great way to secure outside media hits in publications that you wouldn't normally reach, perhaps with your core program, can start to build those relationships with reporters who are new to the brand. So it is a central pillar of a lot of programs if done wisely. Hopefully that gave you some advice on how to choose those opportunities and just the mechanism of doing it. Chris, thanks for sharing some of the war stories there and some of the advice. And thank you all for listening. I hope that was useful. If you like this, please do subscribe or go to our website, firebrand.marketing/resources, to sign up for our newsletter, where we also have a lot of other great advice. And we will see you all again this time next week.